Welcome to Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free. Hello, Otterites. This is episode 188.
I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis.
All right, gentlemen, we are here in Studio R in the atrium over here at my place. And we are joined today by not just Martin and Francis, and of course Robert sitting in the captain's chair, but by Middle Spawn's child, Nemo the dog.
Yes, make sure that you mention he is a canine. That's right.
Yes, he is, as the Middle Spawn puts it, my grand dog. Which of course makes Martin want to choke.
As much as I love the puppers, you own a dog.
How lewd.
Okay?
That's right.
Or Middle Spawn owns a dog, and you are...
Yeah, that dog owns her.
You are dog sitting. So, yes, hi Nemo. He's sitting here with me and...
Staring at me, of course.
Hanging out. So,
Yes.
But he's in the chair with me.
Nemo is a bagel, part basset, part beagle. And he's a good dog. He's a very cuddly animal. He's very friendly. He's in many ways the very opposite of Bosco. Bosco does not like to cuddle. And of course, Martin is trying his best to get Nemo into Francis's lap.
I'm trying to get him to just jump from chair to chair, but no, he wants to jump down. He wants to get down.
Yes. So today, we've totally derailed where we were going already. 30 seconds into the show.
Yeah.
Today is
Captain's
Code of
prerogative,
Honor.
though.
Captain's prerogative. It is Code of Honor. It is the second episode of the month, and we have reserved this second episode of the month for Code of Honor because it's the one we like to do the most, I think.
Yeah.
It's the favorite.
It really is.
Did not get folded in anywhere, or nothing got folded in with it
Exactly.
when we restructured.
So, last episode, we did George Washington, the father of our country, and talked about the greatness that he really was.
Right.
Seminal figure, not just in American history, but world history.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Martin is of the opinion he is the
Shining star.
shining star. Yes, that's great. He is the pivotal figure of the last 2,000 years. That's hard to argue with. I'm sure many could, but we will not, because I think we agree.
Yeah.
If he's not the pivotal, he's certainly top three. So-
And not just, there are lots of important people, but he shepherded a unique governmental experiment into existence.
Yes,
He-
with very
he-
little precedent.
Yeah, won a war and then led that nation as a civilian afterwards.
Well,
Pretty incredible.
A worthwhile experiment.
Yes.
We should qualify that, because any experiment can be made to happen. Nazism was an experiment, for goodness
Yes.
sakes, but a very not only enduring but worthwhile
Right,
moral
right.
approach of
Yes,
a
yes.
system of government that has withstood a great deal of time and no small
Yes.
amount of crap.
Much of human history is grasping for a moral way to govern what humans are.
Yeah, to live together in
Yes.
peace. That's correct.
And Washington achieved it.
Yes, exactly.
Unlike anyone else, really, in a way. It's unlike anyone else.
Well, Bonaparte certainly didn't. I mean, he certainly attempted, but he's an easy example.
Yeah.
And there are others.
Well, yes. I didn't catch all that. I had to step away because Bosco, as you may have heard on the recording, was barking. Even though he was facing the house, by the time I got over to that door to let him in, he was facing the backyard and was guarding something, guarding against something, and now won't come in. Because he's an a-hole sometimes.
Oh,
He saw a
he
leaf
said the
fall
word.
and
He
then
said,
did
"Stop saying the word. Stop saying the word."
So, anyways. So, yes, we're doing George Washington. And his quotes. And as is the normal pattern, one of these fine gentlemen sitting before me will go first. Then the other will go. Then we'll have a bourbon break. And then I will attempt to hammer the points home into a cohesive, if not always intelligible, whole.
While being substantially influenced, one, by a full belly,
Yes.
and two, by a nice big shot of bourbon.
Yes. It's a bit more than a shot.
Yeah, that's right.
But we ended the last Actually, well, we didn't end the episode, but in the post-episode discussion,
Yes, yes.
we were talking about something that Francis thought we should pick up on a little bit before we pick up with the quotes.
Yes, if you listen to the last episode, I used the term marble man a lot. And Robert's not a fan of that term, and we kind of came with a little discussion, realizing we don't mean the same thing with that.
Right, which I didn't think we did.
Yeah, that's right. And it's one of those euphemisms that perhaps deserves a little bit of expounding upon. And when I use the term marble man, I mean that as a high ideal, as someone who would have a marble statue of them placed out for everyone to see, to kind of explain this individual is greater than most everyone else. He achieved more. He was more. Actually, achieve is not even a thing. It's really more about his idealically speaking, he is worthy of emulation. To me, that's what marble man means.
Yes. And that's kind of an
original. That's the intention.
An originalism to it. Over time, though, that became more to be understood as a term of disparagement because we stopped idolizing people.
Right. Jefferson's the prime example because that's where we talked about it initially.
That's right.
Used in reference to him.
Right.
And to me, I object to the term only because I don't care for the usage. I understand how you use it, and I absolutely agree. He is an ideal that we can all aspire to, especially even though nobody can ever come close to those achievements because it's just a unique situation.
He wouldn't call people names on Twitter.
Very much so.
No, that's very
much so.
That's very true.
But to me, the Marble Man it just conjured images of something cold and inflexible, hard and harsh, and don't see him that way. And nor should we. Yes. And I understand you don't, but
it became, I think, most commonly associated with Robert E. Lee.
Correct, and that's not my intention by any
both
means.
Pre-war and post-war. He was seen as the Marble Man because, of course, I think very famously had no demerits while at the academy. So he was seen as this distant, aloof, better than all of us person. And then after the war, of course, it all became associated with the lost cause myth and all of this. He was greater than all of us. Our loss was not his fault, and all that business.
Right. So, it's hard to overcome that connotation that has really no relationship with my usage. But
it also, I think it tends to because of people like Lee, a form of hero worship that is dangerous.
Yeah.
And, but it's just interesting, again, as many things with us, one side little comment and, 3 hours later, we hashed it out.
It's that clear thing that you always say, context matters.
Yes,
And Marble Man has become one of those terms that has differing context.
Oh, very much so.
Depending on who you say it to.
That's right. Yeah, it can be a term of derision or of worship.
Yeah, it is very difficult.
Or admiration or aloofness. I mean, all of those can be used.
Yeah.
Yes.
And yet, depending on your usage, may not be.
Yes,
very much
as we've all illustrated here.
So I think there's an agreement not to use the term anymore.
Because it just means
too many different things.
Well, yeah, the way we are so freewheeling. I only had 3 bourbons so far.
That's right.
The way we are so freewheeling in our discussions, I don't think we can guarantee that something won't be said. We can't even keep the F-bombs off the show.
Right. It works for me in so many ways at times. And granted, we don't always talk about those individuals to which it would apply.
Right. I don't think we've ever used the term on the show before.
That is very possible. Yeah. It's not something that I like to bandy about because very few, as I've defined the term, achieve that level.
Yeah.
Of course, we can also talk about the fact that they don't. That's, I suppose, a possibility. Yeah. But, no, I'm not one for banning words. I'm not.
Okay. That is a fair point.
Exactly.
Did you need
no,
another ball?
No. I'm good with what I've got here now. I may slip out at some point while Martin is prognosticating and proliferating and getting a couple of pieces of ice for my.
Yes, I meant a sphere of ice. I have made these ice balls. That's what I was referring to.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Probably, if you have more, I probably will.
Yes, I made
Yes.
enough so we each would have 2 for,
well,
a day.
at some point, while Martin is going on and on and on,
You will definitely.
I will slide out and add.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, the ice spheres work wonderfully. I love them. They remind me of the planet Hoth.
Yes.
Oh, yes. I understand that. Yes.
The frozen ice ball that was Hoth.
So a little Hoth in your drink?
Yes, so it works great. So,
So who's going first?
yeah, there you go.
He
Robert.
is.
Yes, that way you can slip out and get your ball.
Exactly.
Of ice.
Of ice, that's correct.
All right. Maybe.
Hey, how many have you had?
All right, so my Washington quote, be Americans. Let there be no sectionalism, no north, south, east, or west. You are all dependent on one another and should be one in union. In one word, be a nation. Be Americans and be true to yourselves. Considering what happened after he left the stage, this is, some amazing stuff, I think.
Yeah.
It's a very forward thinking, another thing in his cap that he didn't just think about the past. He thought about what would be important for the nation's future.
Right. And, as we said in the last episode, we talked about how he drew on his experience. It was certainly very easy for him to see the factions that exist in every country.
Yeah.
And he probably didn't really expect that there wouldn't become political parties or anything like that, because they had already begun while he was in office, but they didn't really take off until after him, because I think nobody really wanted to while he was there.
Well, factionalization is a reality that was something
Right.
he probably anticipated.
Exactly. I think that's kind of the point of this.
In English history, it was everywhere. I mean, that was how it worked.
Everywhere, it's everywhere.
Well, exactly. But that was his immediate window.
Right, and you may have missed that. So I was saying, it's certainly easy for him to see that in Great Britain and Europe and everywhere, these things will happen. But I think the important thing to remember is to guard against it. Yeah. To remember that we are fellow Americans. That, we are not just from Kentucky and from Ohio. Well, we can hate the people in Ohio, but that's the different thing. That's my Michigan.
Michigan's kind of
yeah. I was going to say your Michigan background coming in.
But we're not just from our individual states or even our individual cities and towns and little villages. Mm-hmm. There is a higher group that we are meant to call ourselves, because only united can we do great things. Not the least of which was defeating the greatest military power in the world at the time to achieve our independence.
Well, it's working against tribalism, essentially, is what it is.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with tribes in and of themselves. They're also inherent. It's putting them at loggerheads against one another. Because by the end of the revolution, the colonies, and for the most part, I would say most of the people in them, were relatively united. Mm-hmm. Not as much in the beginning. We talked about this in the last episode. The Tories faded. Especially, they just were not as well treated by the British as Americans were by the own Continental Army. And I think that probably was no small factor in that. And once it was seen as inevitable, of course, the rest bowed to reality.
Well, no guillotine.
Right. And we also had no guillotine.
There was no revenge. On those who had remained loyal.
Well, there was some tarring and feathering that happened on occasion, but those are usually done for those who stepped outside the social order.
Well, I was going to say, that's for the local guy who was an a-hole.
Well, yeah, that's correct. I mean, you had to work really hard to reach yourself to that point.
Yes.
They didn't like you otherwise.
Pretty much, yes. Which, I'm not condoning it, but
it's a factor in the nation's early survival, in that there wasn't a big revenge parade. There's not 10,000 people run through the guillotine.
Right.
Women
aren't having their hair shaved and paraded in shame.
Yeah,
stuff like that.
It was a factor in our survival that was like, hey, we're separate from Britain now. We know you stayed loyal. What do you want to do? Yeah. And people, it's, okay, well, cool.
Well, we did the same thing in the Civil War, in the aftermath.
Yeah.
There was very little revenge. I mean, there's obviously some.
It was always a personal thing, though.
Yes,
not
it
a
was
corporate thing.
Right. It was a personal thing. It was very rarely It might have been a corporate thing in the sense of
small groups, sure.
It took a lot of political will to even just like imprison Jefferson Davis.
Right.
Nathan Bedford Forrest was never tried for war crimes.
Right.
I mean, we let him go home.
That's right. Even the concept of war crimes hadn't even been invented yet.
Confederate generals served in Congress.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah.
So
go home.
Right.
It's
We are
over.
all Americans. This is the point. We are all Americans. Now go home and be an American.
Yeah.
Just like
he
said.
Washington coming out with that statement. The only way this works is if we're united.
You know what? That sentiment, whether it's intentional or whether it just somehow got bred into our psyche, it is how Americans respond to a crisis. Look at 9/11. We were never more unified as a country in my lifetime than we were on 9/12.
And that's a very Washingtonian thing?
In many ways, but not entirely, because I think Washington would have said, "Well, why weren't you united on 9/10? Why did it take 9/11?"
Yeah.
But that's the ideal. He has offered us the ideal. Be that, work for it.
That's right.
And he
was committed to the idea. Yeah. That's how he could speak so lovingly and so perfectly on that. Is absolutely is that it was a thing for him. It was an absolute. It didn't always be that way. It wasn't always that way to others. Factionalization, tribalism, whatever you want to call it, is still bred into our bone.
Yes,
it's this because in many respects, Washington is speaking of something that is anti-evolutionary from where we came from.
In many ways,
this concept of a national unity, a unity on a scale that great, is inconceivable to that inside of us that worries about the other across the river that may come to try to take stuff from us. It's a mark of civilization that we can think this way.
What's interesting is how he phrases it, and I think this is the important part. He doesn't say, be the United States of America. He doesn't say, be the country. He says, be Americans. Yeah. Be the people of the country. Be united as members, as citizens of the country.
He's speaking of a political ethnicity.
Not even political. I think it's more of a social in nature.
Okay, yeah.
In a way, he's trying to help define the American social contract.
It's a very strong endorsement of the notion that power flows from the people.
Yes, I would say that's a
which is also
I think
again
it's implicit.
This
yes,
very very unique, attitude for the time. That's power isn't coming from the higher god,
moist tart who lobs a scimitar at somebody.
Right. That's right. It's the political authority that we have as a government exists solely because the people grant us that power.
So his quotation is a political statement.
Yes,
less than a social one, meaning we are all one people. We are all
both.
I'm not necessarily. Sorry. I knew this was coming. I'm not necessarily trying to put the two against each other, but I'm trying to think: what was his intention? I don't know that we can say.
I don't know that we can say, but by the words, I can agree that yes, it is a two-part thing, but because he's talking about the individuals at the citizen level, aspiring to an ideal. To me, that comes off as far less political. But I can also see where he might also include it as the political because he wasn't for parties.
Yeah, he's not asking us to be subservient to the state.
Oh, God, no.
That's correct.
No. But he wants us to be united to this American ideal, whatever that ideal, however you want to define it, because everybody's going to define it differently.
I think that's exactly the point, how we all define it. What that common ground that we exist upon.
That's part of the problem, is that we don't all define it the same way.
That's right. But I think that's what he's urging us towards.
That's what he's striving for.
Create your common ground.
You're more alike than you think.
Yes, exactly. You have far more in common than you have different. Lean into that.
Don't let sectionalism or factionalism pull you apart. You you are one people.
Sectionalism, not sexualism.
Sectionalism is in the quote.
That's correct. It
there
almost
be no-
sounded like sexualism.
Let there be no sexualism.
That's another issue.
Well, that's because of my pronunciation after 2 bourbons.
Let's say that.
Yes, he's warning against sectionalism. He's warning against these divisions that, again, he's able to reach across and hold everything together. But he's very mindful of the mercantile drive of Hamilton and New York in the Northeast versus this pastoral ideal, agrarian ideal of Jefferson and Virginia and all that. Again, our history lessons, is a good thing, tend to view the colonies all alike, but they weren't.
That is a mistake on our part. Well, yeah,
socially and economically, which fed each other.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these places were not alike. And
which comes to a head in the Civil War.
Yeah.
It's essentially agrarian versus industrial, North versus South, which is a happenstance of geography.
Yeah, I mean, trade versus insulation,
rural versus urban.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all
it's free versus slave.
Well, that's correct. All of the above those divisions were very distinct. Geographically speaking, which is why you could have a civil war like we had it, because you had the proximity with your neighbors to create a cohesive whole in the South and the North as well.
Yeah, but
which is not something that civil wars. If we're ever going to have any future ones, and I'm not so sure we're not having some now. They don't work that way because there is not a geographic basis for them. There's a little bit of one because politically speaking, the West Coast and the East Coast are very of like mind, and the rest of this flyover country. I hate that word, but for the right reasons, that's exactly right. Think differently, and it's not. It may have stemmed from those divisions back in there, but they're really not those divisions.
Yeah, it's the same.
Urban versus rural, yes.
Yeah,
but
it's the economic basis feeding these social conditions. When you're a trading area, because you have that port, that tends to influence your social structures in a certain way that's less insular. When you're
exposed to more.
Right. Yeah.
But when you're strictly growing tobacco,
cotton
in North Carolina,
that's all you
cotton, Georgia, then there's only one thing you're trading, and that's the only interest that state has or that region has. And that stuff, it was a source of friction. And it bled into everything. It bled into the foreign relations, because you talk about this time is also, again, this, what do we do about France? They're our buddies, but Washington and Hamilton and Adams are like, let's not get dragged into this. Their revolution is not the same as ours. Whereas Jefferson and some of the other Virginians were like, we need to be jumping on this, guys. These are our buddies. This is egalite, fraternity,
liberty.
Liberty. We're in with this. And Washington's like, we cannot get tied into this again.
There's some philosophical.
We're not ready to go back to war. We'll thank the French, but we're going to stand aside.
Right.
And at the same time, Hamilton's going, look, the only way we survive is if we reestablish trade with Britain. And so all these sectional things are causing friction and a distortion even of our foreign policy.
Which ultimately led to the War of 1812 in many respects.
Yeah.
So, but there's even in
Napoleon had no small part of that.
Well, that's correct. That's right. Well, but he upended some things that could have could have been differently.
Yes.
But there's Jefferson had a bunch of trade restrictions with Britain that nearly sank New England. They had no money coming in, and that was very nearly another thing that just completely splintered the whole country. So
it goes back to the movie The Patriot, one of my favorite favorite scenes between two awesome actors. You remember the actor that played Cornwallis, Tom Wilkinson, is having a conversation with Tarleton, played by Jason Isaacs, and they had and of course he is based on Banister Tarleton, the partisan fighter in North Carolina. They changed his name, John Tavington, but they have a conversation saying, no, Cornwallis says, no, you're not going to treat these people this way, because when we are done, we are going to reestablish trading with them. Cornwallis had the idea that, this is bigger than you guys. These are our people. These are us. Right. We shouldn't be doing this at all.
He really had in that respect.
Yeah.
How much of it was truly a driving force in reality, I don't know, but that's the same opinion that Washington had.
That's right. We should work for peace so we can get back to business and trade with these people and raise all of our qualities of standards of life. We all benefit when we do this.
Yes, as he saw us as them.
That's right. And then,
as Lincoln said, when will they understand? It is all our territory.
In respects, and not to put a financial or mercantilist spin as the ultimate driving goal for all of these things, because it's much more complex than that. But it is a factor.
Yes.
And in many respects, that's what we're all working to get back to in this.
Well, to me... I'm
leading the jury here in a little bit. I'm sorry. It'll become more clear when I get to my quote in a minute.
To me, just the whole idea, which again, to me, it is the ultimate ideal. It's the thing that frustrates probably most people about politics today, is that inability to just be Americans.
Yeah.
And that has bled over into the social. Mm-hmm. We cannot just be Americans anymore.
Only when we are threatened from the outside do we do that well.
Only in the midst of an existential threat.
Right.
And on 9/12, that appeared to be an existential threat.
Very much so, yeah.
So, it's a great ideal. It's one of those things I don't think we can ever live up to. But it's that thing we should always return to when we come to our senses.
Mm-hmm. That's right, yeah.
And that's part of the problem, is we have yet to come to our senses often enough to return to it, to really make the country as great as it could be.
Well, yeah, exactly. If we recognize there is a win-win scenario in all cases, there always is. If we hunt for that and find for that and are okay with that, but greed, unfortunately, I think that's the
greed in whatever form, whether it's monetary or not.
Yeah, that's right. Some form of greed.
Greed for power.
That's right. Ultimately, is what is the downfall of us working together.
Yes, everybody nowadays, whether it's socially or politically, thinks they are Ulysses Grant because all they want is unconditional surrender.
Well, that's right. Well, or Bella Oxmix. Hey, I got to be the unity.
Same thing.
Same thing. It's exactly the same thing. That's right.
So, I think we're ready for Francis to go.
All right. Yes. When I read this quote, you'll kind of get where I was going at a second ago. This is a new subject, totally new subject, but it's one that we have not really, I don't think, addressed hard, straight, fast on. And it's something that's very near and dear to me. I've been giving a lot of thought to this in recent years, and it's something that I realize this is if humankind is ever to truly have a downfall, it is this. It is, we cannot stop doing this. And Washington, wisely so from all of his perspective, understood this because he lived it. And it's a very simple and brief quote, and I'll give you my first wish is to see this plague of mankind, war, banished from the earth. I truly see that is what has always held us back. We simply cannot get along. Now, you can take that war into the political arena, into the military arena, into the social arena, into the, you take it where you want to. War, and it's kind of very anti-Clausewitz. War is a continuation of politics by other means. He's speaking of the military presumption. But he's recognizing that we, left to ourselves, we always devolve into battle. Everything is a battle. Us versus them. We must defeat and destroy our enemies and redefine them too. Usually as less than human, mind you. That's one of our That's one of our tactics. But that's not the only one. But nevertheless, it's still feeding this beast within us that necessitates us going to war. It's always lurking in the background. If you don't do what I do, I will go to war, whatever that looks like, on the large and the small. And Washington saw that for the plague that he calls it, and I think he is absolutely right.
Well, on the one hand, I am tempted to be snarky and say, well, duh.
No, yeah, exactly, yeah.
But on the other hand, I think that poor dog. So I'm sitting here. I'm trying not to laugh. The way we have got Studio R set up here, we've pulled in some nice, comfortable chairs, and there is very little space between the desk that is in here and the chair that Francis is sitting in, and that's the space that Bosco needs to pass through to get over to his nap spot, because it's the afternoon. This is his napping room. And Nemo...
And the sun's coming through the window. It's nice
Exactly.
and warm, and it's time for a nice warm nap.
So Nemo was in the spot where he needed to walk. And the desk, the way it's built, in Bosco being a large dog, he had a very difficult time getting through that. It was really cracking me up. I'm sorry. It just... Very funny. I know Francis is sitting there thinking, yeah, okay, it's a dog story. We can move on. Because, as we know, Francis is not the number one fan of dogs.
No, but we were rolling, man.
We were rolling.
We were rolling. And I forgot
Well,
where we were.
No, I know where we are.
All right.
So,
I will trust you.
with your quote about war being the plague that it is, which it is, I agree, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think where the talking about it went, I don't necessarily too far, but I don't think that the striving against one another is a bad thing. I don't think it's a terrible thing. It is when it gets to the point to where we have lost our ability to reason with one another that we have to resort to violence. Before that, I see no problem with it, because I do not want to, and granted this is today's climate, I do not want to resort to the destroy the enemy and burn the fields and lay waste to everything.
Assault, yeah.
That is the current climate almost everywhere, not even just in this country, but practically everywhere anymore. But there is nothing wrong with the going to battle, so to speak, philosophically, to hammer out the ideas, to figure out what we need to do. There will never ever be a time when everybody agrees on everything, much less, heck, we're never going to have a time when everybody agrees on one issue. Mm-hmm. Even if there's only two people, mm-hmm. one of them's going to have a reservation about something. Mm-hmm. So
I don't think Washington intended to imply that.
No, but I think you were with your discussion.
And I'm trying to that conflict is inherently bad. It is actually necessary, and it teases out it makes us better in the end.
Yes.
Conflict and battle, However, war
is a different thing.
is an escalation that benefits no one. I think conflict and battle are necessary. They are natural. They are good when they are contained and harnessed towards doing something better with it. We benefit by that. I mean, our adversarial system, both in law and in politics, are built along that. I mean, you go into court and you have two opposing arguments that make themselves, and you look for a ruling, a consensus. That's how things work. Those are good. War is different, though. War is the ultimate destruction of the other side.
Generally, yes.
Generally speaking, whether that be physical destruction, economic destruction, ideological destruction, it doesn't really matter. But it is inherently destructive.
That's a relatively new thing.
World War I has a lot to do with that. Yes. As we've talked about, that's correct.
Because wars were far more localized and...
Well, they were an extension of, intended to be the civilized gentleman's game. You go forth and you...
Because they were monarchs.
That's right. You smack each other physically enough.
Right. See who flinches first,
that's
essentially.
Right. Essentially, and then you negotiate a deal. Which, unfortunately, it was a great lie, because...
Yes.
look at all the dead that it requires to do that. You know,
Yes.
the cannon fodder that essentially people became devices to be used.
Well, I
Especially-
think that's always going to be true in any war, but yes.
well, that's to me that's why
it was prettied up more
military
so then
war
than it is now.
military war has always been evil because of that.
The instigation of it, obviously, you know, unless you choose to be destroyed, you have to engage in it back.
But that's correct, and that's herein lies the problem. That's
Yes.
right. Is that so many? But if you look, and World War One is probably the easy example. Look at the dead. My God, look at the dead. The shallow graves. That when the spring rains came, they all bubbled up to the surface and had to be relocated. I was reading something. This is slightly off topic, but I was reading something this week with regards to the Holocaust, which was an extension of into that, and there were Einsatzgruppen SS people that were designed through Eastern Europe, through Poland and Ukraine, that when the mass graves over time would unearth themselves and the stench was available for miles, they would go in and essentially build these pyramids of that you would set afire and burn the bodies because you had to. And yet, somehow, all that went on and nobody said a thing about it. So sorry. I mean, it's kind of on my background when I'm mentioning this, but war is there is no good thing of war except its ending. That's the only thing I can say. It is probably the greatest sin I think we as a species have permeated upon ourselves, and Washington got that because he lived that. He saw that. He recognized. He saw the dead bodies. There was a moment. I don't know if you saw the movie. You probably didn't. It was an A&E special done with Aidan Quinn. Love Aidan Quinn. He's a great actor. Playing Benedict Arnold. It was the story of Arnold, and believe it or not, Kelsey Grammer played Washington. And he did a very good job. He came across as a younger Washington. I love Kelsey Grammer. I think he does a great job. There's a little scene in there. It was very contrived. It was one of the parts I don't like about the series, where he's sitting there reading as Washington under a tree, and he sees a dead body. He goes and soldier, and he covers it with his cloak. That is endemic to Washington. Something he would absolutely do. He recognized the dignity of humanity, and I believe he mourned the fact that we had to resort to this awful method to bring about what he saw as a necessary thing.
Yeah. He didn't undertake any of this lightly.
That is exactly it.
He didn't undertake being great. I mean, he did not take lightly being granted command at all.
He lobbied.
Knew what it meant.
He lobbied for it, but that was partially because he knew that he had what it took.
Yeah.
And I think we can
Yeah,
call
he
that
has-
a little bit of arrogance, but no, he knew.
Hubris.
He knew.
Hubris. That's right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he showed up to the Continental Congress in uniform.
That's exactly it. Yes.
So he was sending a message.
Correct.
So yes, he
I believe in what you're doing, and I'm your guy.
yeah.
And we are the better for it.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yes, I mean, he was not he did not have to be dragged kicking and screaming into the job.
Right.
He is very self-deprecating. Several places you see quotes where he talks about how he's not worthy to do the job, but he'll do it anyways.
Right.
Which is partially just what you had to say. That was expected.
Yeah, it's part of the show.
Otherwise, you're Horatio Gates.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
So, I think something interesting about that quote, and I think that informs his attitude too, is up until that point, war was especially a tool of conquest. It was a tool of,
Oh yes.
you looked at me the wrong way, or I want to be king of where you are.
Personal glory.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's
all
so
above.
much of the history he would be familiar with of Europe.
Well, yeah, because you've got from
War of the
1600
Spanish Succession and all this other business.
The wars of religion.
It all would look so foolish
Yeah.
from his perspective. It's like, why would you fight over that?
And yet he still used the same tactics and methods that they used.
Well,
But-
tactics and methods are different than the why you fought.
of course, it is. And I'm just pointing out an irony
So
here.
he
that-
would have been, he was the leader for history's first war of liberation almost.
successful one. Yes,
Yeah,
right.
I mean, what he
successful.
did.
That's right. I mean, you can
Spartacus might.
I was about to say
yeah.
the same thing. Yeah, the servile wars that were fought.
He's the guy that led the first successful war of liberation. And
Well,
so he's going to
yes.
look back at these things in
Let's-
recent history was...
I think it's a little bit of hyperbole.
Yeah, sure.
Because, I mean,
Sure.
really, the 13 colonies did not have anything to be liberated again from. I mean, let's face it. Yeah, the whole taxation
It was more
without
it was separation versus more.
It's
liberation.
definitely
Yeah.
revolution. I
Yeah.
prefer to talk about it as the only truly successful revolution.
Yeah.
All others failed within 10 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think liberation's a bit much.
Yeah. But it was something that was unknown at his time.
Exactly, yes.
The
Yes,
idea
absolutely.
of we're going to go to war to save someone else.
Even though, well, it had been spoken of that way many times before, but for God's sakes, William the Bastard said the same thing when he crossed from Normandy
Yeah.
to England. You know, he's not known as William the Liberator; he's known as William the Conqueror.
Right, right.
So this, it was just... He's at a very unique moment of looking back at, for that recent history and all of that stuff.
And was well educated on that.
Yeah.
He definitely knew this. Yeah.
And it just, all that stuff would have seemed ridiculous.
Yes.
And, he's just, what we have done since would be unknown to him. This a notion of, well, okay, we've got to go over there and the Nazis are killing everybody. Mechanized death is not something.
The mechanization of war.
Understand.
I mean, he perhaps could have get a little of that because technology had, increased a little. I mean, the rifle barrel and the muskets and all that stuff. There was at least a little bit of that. Yeah. But you're right. The concept of a true war of liberation, which you could say World War II, the invasion from D-Day forward, it was intended to be that. But even then, we didn't know it. It was only when the Holocaust, it
depends on what you are talking about being liberated. Because I think, because obviously that's primarily U.S. forces.
Yeah.
From our
certainly
perspective,
what it was called when you got to France.
Yeah,
that's
you
right.
were liberating.
That's
France.
right. It was, but
Liberating France.
I guess we did not realize the depth of exactly what that was. When
Not
we
the
went
common man.
Oh no, not at all. And I don't know that anybody did in the West.
There are hints that
They started
we
to know,
knew.
yeah.
At high government levels, we knew what was going on.
Yeah, well, because as I said earlier, you can't hide this stuff.
Right.
You tried. Believe me, they would kill anybody that witnessed this sort of stuff.
Which I find interesting. This is one of the things I find fascinating about the whole. Yes, we knew, maybe not to the extent the industrialization of murder that Hitler had achieved, but we knew that the camps existed and that they were killing Jews and other undesirables.
Okay.
Now, because they were almost universally considered undesirables, it didn't. We didn't make a big stink about it. Perhaps the way we would now. I always find that fascinating
because insidious in a way.
I don't know. It's insidious. It just amazes me that it's not used for propaganda. When you think about it, you got a man who's leading that country over there, and he is rounding people up, innocent men and women and children, especially women and children, and just butchering them, sending them to camps to be worked to death, or gassed and bodies burned. Again, don't know the full extent of what they absolutely knew, but they knew. And yet it wasn't used. It was almost like it was a polite gentleman's agreement. Oh, we don't talk about that.
Well, I think
because we had our own camps in California for the Japanese. I don't know.
No,
certainly
I don't
we
think
didn't
it
do
wasn't that.
to them what Hitler did. But
because it was not designed for mass murder.
We still put people in camps. That's
correct.
Very bad thing.
That is not to diminish that at all, but the purposes were very different, and the execution was very different. Because literally, the final solution was wholesale, industrial, strategic. We wish to genocide was the goal.
Yes.
And that's something that
because you got to make room for people that you want to move into the places.
Lebensraum. Well, that's a lot. Well, you demonize this group in particular as the problem, and therefore, but they believed it. It wasn't just a convenient scapegoat. They had built a case that they believed truly that they were subhuman. pariahs, leeches. Whatever.
And, they certainly had centuries of European history to build on that.
That's correct.
This
So,
idea was part of the culture, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's correct. And they recognize that the fact that the other cannot coexist with us, because if the other does, then we are diminished. That's in many respects.
It's a zero-sum game.
That's correct.
Which
There's no room for it for those people.
Yeah, which I've always said, any moment in time is a zero-sum game, absolutely, because by definition, it is the pie you're dealing with.
Right.
But there is no such thing over the long term.
Exactly.
The pie grows and
because
shrinks.
we don't have a tendency to think in the fourth dimension like we should.
Perhaps.
That's another subject, though, another episode.
Yes.
I feel like we have gotten way off track here.
We often do.
Yes.
Let's get back to George.
Yes.
So, time for...
Well, if you give me a chance, man, it's my show today.
I know, but that's what I was... It was a
totally
question,
giving you
not a demand.
No, but you're sitting over there clinking your ice.
Well, I know, because I'm getting ready to grab this.
Mr. Howard, the bottle stands by you, sir. Oh, you're going, Russell. Are you going that
So
one?
it's time for a bourbon break, which, there we go. Nice sound effect. Excellent. That is Martin opening the bottle of Russell's Reserve.
One more little snoot.
Yes. Yes, this is actually my third bourbon, and unfortunately, because, that's the only thing about ice that I don't like is that no matter what you do, even with a sphere, it just melts too fast.
Which is necessary and good, but we have a tendency not to drink our bourbon quickly.
We don't. We are sippers.
Yeah, that's very much so, which is part of the design.
But we're also sitting here, jawing away.
That's correct.
And, probably most people don't take an hour to drink a glass of bourbon. Which, for us, that is often the case.
Perhaps that might be the intended proper way anyway. You should take plenty of time with your bourbon. That's what I've always heard.
It's certainly enjoyable, and what else is the point?
Well, yes, I'm not saying we should guzzle.
No, yeah.
I'm just saying that, if we were to do it before the ice is melted is my point. Which is the whole point of the spheres, which greatly does help. But it is still a lot of ice to melt.
But then again, whether it melts or not, the coldness is gone. And the same amount of time
stays for a while.
You think it stays longer than it takes ice to melt?
Oh yeah, because it doesn't immediately become room temperature as soon as the ice is gone.
Yeah, interesting. I've never considered that.
I mean, remember your laws of physics. The temperatures are moving to a middle ground.
Exactly.
Well, that's right. I was going to say. But anyway, the advantage I'm thinking of ice versus the spheres is by adding the cold water that blooms the intended way of the particular bourbon. Not all. I mean, some are more better enjoyed neat. I think is a fair statement.
I don't know. I don't know. I've come across any that I've enjoyed neat.
I'm kind of the same way, and because for a long time I was just neat, and I would try, and I'm thinking, no, as we've tried it, I think it's intended to be this way for most of them.
I like my bourbon like I like my sex, sloppy.
Okay, let's go back to what we were drinking here. That's right.
If it's not neat, it's sloppy.
Well, it was it George Carlin once said, you drive like old people, boop,
yes,
slow and sloppy.
Slow and sloppy.
That's right. But anyway, George. Yes, there was definitely never a wit like his.
I don't think we've ever had a silence that long after that joke. I don't know. I just couldn't think of anything to come back with there.
We should have had a rim shot.
Yeah, that
one.
We
didn't have that.
Really should have. Yes. Yeah. No pun intended.
All right. So what did you have?
Don't go there. Don't go there.
You still have Old Forester.
I am. This is the. I'm telling you guys.
He's got to finish off my bottle.
This is Old Forester is my brand these days. I've discovered it. When we were at my place, we had two of the four Whiskey Row extensions, I suppose you would call them, of the brand. Which next time we're at my place, I have all four of them now, which are uncracked as we speak. Now I don't know how long that'll last, but I have told my youngest, "Keepest thou paws off the damned Ofo. Don't touch it, dude. Okay,
Ofo.
That's right.
Nice.
Well, that's what my sister called it because she works for Brown-Forman, and she says that's just kind of what they thought. Ofo. It's one of their brands. But this 100 proof Old Forester that we're drinking here, dang, it's good. It really is. It just is that good. I'm truly, I used to be a Basil Hayden guy, and I still love Basil Hayden. Don't get me wrong, but I think if I was to walk into a bar, and a bourbon bar, and I'd say, pour me a shot of such and such, it would be an Old Forester I'd ask for these days.
I find it
That
hard
will
to
change, perhaps.
argue. Yeah, because that stuff is killer.
Absolutely.
It's killer.
An honorable mention to Wild Turkey. I could easily.
I was just thinking of that.
Easily do
Love
that
it,
one
love
too.
the Wild Turkey,
and we
yes.
just don't have any with us today.
Yes.
And we may. I've got some at the house. We will go. I'm not sure what you have at your place, Martin. If you're got any of that.
The one that we did not try when you guys were at Studio M last is the Monk's
Road. I know that that we're coming back to that.
I've since opened it and tried it, and I want you all to try it. It's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. It's from the Dant Distillery out that way.
Yeah,
Gethsemane,
Log Still Distillery.
Which exactly.
And it has some wheat in the mash bill, so it's a
I
little
grew up
mellower.
literally
and-
miles from that place. It's some really great stuff. I'm looking forward to that. But
Yes.
Old Forester still is my thing, at least for now.
It's
Yes,
awesome.
well, it is a very good bourbon. It
Put a little
is-
ice to it, 100 proof. It's just right at that sweet
Yes,
spot.
it is- it
a
really
little
is excellent.
caramel to it.
Mhm.
I'm trying to get my palate back, guys. A little bit of that, a teensy bit of pepper, but it's smooth.
The more and more I
smooth,
think
smooth,
about the taste, I try to express what this.
Yeah.
I really think that's the char coming through.
Yeah, I think so. It's hard for us to get our
Yeah. Well, we're
words
still
around.
learning the vocabulary. You know,
Very much so. I mean, we're
even
not
though we've been
master-
doing the bourbon break now for almost 3 years.
Yeah, well, bourbon, I think, is something like so many other things. It is best learned over the long term.
Yes,
It really is.
It really is.
What did you pour, Robert?
So I poured some Elijah Craig 1789 small batch,
Good stuff.
and
We've had that here before,
Yes.
I think. I don't recall the taste, though.
it's very good. It's one of those bourbons that, to me, there's a group of bourbons we've been drinking of late that have similar profiles in terms of their impact on the palate and what have you.
Yes.
So the Old Forester, the Wild Turkey, the Basil Hayden, all of those I find similar to that impact. That there's a great amount of flavor in the mouth. You know, so that it really, because obviously your taste buds, you know, everything in your mouth, that's where the tasting is going to happen.
Sure.
And not all bourbons really give you that same impact there, like these have been. And Elijah Craig, I think, is one that does that. And of course, we did the Wild Turkey and the Elijah Craig and the Old Forester, and the Knob Creek is another one that has a similar impact in that way. Had all those around at the same time. It was like a renaissance of bourbon tasting there for a while because everything was new and wonderful. It's 94 proof, so it's a bit higher proof than is the standard that we've been having. That's right around there though. I think this is a wheated whiskey. It's a little bit lighter in color, a little more amber. Don't really taste a whole lot of rye.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely get some of the char, but again, like some of these others, it's sweet. I don't know that it's very. It's the caramel specific or the vanilla that you get with some of the others, like a Woodford.
Yeah.
But you definitely get some sweetness.
I think if I remember right, Elijah Craig's one of my favorites too. It's almost like a toffee and honey to it a little tiny
I think
bit.
you could say that.
Yeah. And then the Russell Reserve and the Old Forester is more kind of a salted caramel, a little bit to it, with some cinnamon at the end.
Yeah. So. Now, I have no idea. I do not remember what all of these cost. One was the Russell's Reserve was a gift, so I have no idea.
It's a little bit more pricey.
I believe so.
Yeah.
It's like 40-ish, give or take a little.
34.
34.
I think you could get it for mid-30s.
Okay. I know the Old Forester was not terribly high priced. I mean, for God's sake, it's got a screw top.
Yeah, it's under 40. I know that.
I think it's under 30.
Yeah, I think you may be right on that.
So I think the Russell Reserve is right around the $35 mark, and I think your Elijah Craig would be about a $28 mark.
I do not remember.
It's going up a little bit. It used to be more of a 22. But
what hasn't? I mean, it's not like the price of eggs or anything, but
Yeah.
But yeah, they're all very good. Good.
That was our message to our buddy Sprague from NYC. Francis slapped his face after I tried to do another shout out to our new bourbon friend.
Well, we don't know which episode she's going to listen to.
Yes.
So,
but it was, don't be afraid of low cost bourbon. You don't have to spend $50 and $60 to get good stuff.
Right.
Absolutely, that's
You-
correct.
you
A good $30 bottle is. I mean, you can.
Well,
15s are fine.
Yeah.
Well, the standard Four Roses, I think that's the best example of a very good bourbon that is, very cheaply priced. Because even this standard, it might even be an 80 proof, I don't remember, but that's an excellent one. And I've got 2 different small batches in there.
Yep.
Because I got a small batch for Christmas from the pastor. And, each a little bit different, but very similar profiles because it's Four Roses, but still none of them are terribly expensive.
No, that's right. As we've said many
The one from
times.
Pastor is the most expensive of the ones I have. But,
Well, there's no such thing as bad bourbon.
right, even a bad bourbon is still bourbon.
That's right. Yeah.
Except for Trader Joe's.
Except for Trader Joe's.
That's
the
yes,
exception
that
that
is the
proves the
exception.
That is the exception that proves the rule. That's
Yes.
right, because that one was right out.
Yes, that was just the
Monty
nastiest crap ever. And, sorry, Trader Joe's. Normally we try not to talk bad about bourbon,
You got called out.
but man, you got to do better.
Whoever's buying, I'm sure you've made a deal. Renegotiate. There's
Yeah.
plenty of. I'm sure there are plenty of good, reputable distillers that would be happy to provide you your product that you can put your label on.
I forget, and I could be wrong, so pardon if I am wrong, because I'm not going to bother to Google it. I want to say that the Trader Joe's bourbon might come out of the Four Roses distillery,
Okay.
which just astounds me.
I was going to say because somebody's making it for them. I don't know
Right,
what it
yeah,
is.
somebody's making it for 'em,
They
yeah.
don't do that themselves. They're
But it's
they're
just the
rebranding.
nastiest crap. It's almost like, that's the batch that went bad. Send that to Trader Joe's. It's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, that's.
Because I'll drink a very old Barton before I'll drink that stuff.
Yeah,
Like,
very
the
well
barrel
said.
broke
Yeah.
and they vacuumed it up off the Rick House floor and then put it in bottles.
Yeah.
It's not a bad way of putting it. That's correct. Yeah,
Maybe.
But I mean,
it might have had to squeeze it out of the ground. I'm not sure.
I mean, don't be afraid. Evan Williams at 15 to 18 even is good stuff.
No, old Granddad, very old Barton. They're all around that $13, $15 bottle.
That Heaven Hill bottle I've got in there.
Heaven Hill's not bad.
Bond.
Absolutely, that.
I keep meaning to push that or pull that to the front of my bourbons because I keep wanting to get back to it. But as I'm looking at it, because they all sit on top of my refrigerator, and I've got about a dozen bottles,
Well-
and the ones in the back, they tend to get forgotten.
Well, what you need to do is like I did last time. We polished off 5 bottles last time we were at my place.
Yes,
Because
not
there
full
was-
bottles.
No, because there wasn't much left.
Yes.
So I just kind of cleared the palate. So
Most of them aren't that low.
Yeah,
We did that a while back with some of the ones that were really low.
yeah. When you get lows, just kind of figure out. Okay,
Although my old Forester's getting pretty low.
I've been guilty of a little bit of that. I'm loving it. I really love
It
this
is.
old
It's-
Forester.
it's-
It's
so-
one of the best.
Robert, here I've got something for you, man.
Sure.
So, I know it's super creepy how Facebook ads seem to like read your mind,
Yes.
but I've been getting Facebook ads for Wayfair for these like self-contained bars.
Oh,
You know how you pull the doors open and
Yes.
it's got the doors all have shelves and stuff like that.
I've been looking.
I think you need to find a corner here someplace.
Right here on the other side of this wall is where it's going.
Oh,
There you
you've
go.
already got a picture.
Oh.
Yeah, I already know where it's going. I just have not
All right, knuckle me
found
down.
one yet.
That's it.
Blow
Well, yeah,
that
that's
up.
like I did upstairs in my office. You just devoted space, and mine wasn't tough. It was just a bookshelf, but it's
Right.
got the doors, and it fills it very well, and it's
Yeah,
going to be intended for essentially just bourbon.
It would be very James Bond
Yes.
for you. I mean, it's where you open it up and you've got the glasses and you got the ice bucket and then you've got all the bottles on the
There's
sides.
a bourbon barrel bar.
Yes,
that
yes, I've seen
Oh
those
my
out
God,
there.
It's
Yes.
expensive though.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get just the barrel, it's not. But you add shelves into it, it's like jumps up tremendously. If I have the money, I
It's
would
the
definitely
work.
do one
Yeah,
of those.
well, something to work on and to find
Yes,
yourself a
but yes,
space to
yes,
devote to that.
Yes.
Yes.
Get you a
It's-
corner bar to pull open.
It's very something that people a conversation piece. It's very, I don't want to say elitist, but it is. It's something that every wife would love to have because it's kind of saying, here we are sophisticated people.
It's
My wife knows better.
It's furniture.
But yeah, it's,
So-
that's right. But you can.
The only downside is I think probably the Wayfair stuff is going to be put together.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
I mean, it is quality stuff. As a general rule, I've never had a problem with most of the Wayfair stuff.
Yeah.
Ideally, I would love it if I just had someplace to actually put in a small bar, an actual bar.
An actual
Yes.
bar, yeah.
Yeah, but there's really without us gutting the first floor here and redoing things, which I would love to do, win the lottery or something, or sell off the rights of my book to Netflix. Then we'll probably gut the first floor and make some changes. But
in the meantime, look at a furniture bar on Wayfair.
Absolutely.
And I'll help you put it together if you need an extra set of hands.
Well, he did help me put together some of my bookshelves at the house when we moved, so or help me stock them, certainly, to make
But, a corner bookshelf with the doors underneath and just open shelves, that would work very nicely as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've looked at various options.
Yeah, a china cabinet, that which was intended for that, works very well as a bar.
Yes.
That's right. Just as long as the shelves are either adjustable
the
or the right
bottles
height.
can be seen.
That's right.
Yes.
Very
but
important.
I want something with doors as well.
Very important.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
correct.
Ideally, I would like something where it's fine where if there are opaque doors, that's okay. You can put supplies down there. But the good bottles, I would like to display.
And that's how mine is set up.
And there's
where you
space
can do
for
that.
the glasses and the ice bucket when we fill it for.
I mean, ideally, it would be I would build one like Osato in his office there in the James Bond movie.
Yes.
You only live twice. Yeah, where it's got where you open it and it's a whole room of stuff. And as Bond, of course, he drinks it after he disposes of the guy. He goes, "Oh, Siamese vodka, awful."
Yeah. The Siamese vodka.
Yes. I would love to have a room that opened into the bourbon room at the Fraser.
Well, that's essentially what that kind of was. Yeah,
Yes.
that's right. With
That would be awesome.
Lots of lights, lots of glass shelving, and lots of bottles. That's kind of what it was.
That would be awesome. So we've probably sufficiently pummeled that equine.
Yes.
And so now it's time for you guys to repeat your phrases so that I can then BS my way into hammering it all together.
What you've already done a pretty good job of, I would say. I think there's some ground to work from here. So, my quote from George Washington: "Be Americans. Let there be no sectionalism, no north, south, east, or west. You are all dependent on one another and should be one in union. In one word, be a nation. Be Americans and be true to yourselves." I suspect that is probably from his farewell address, but I don't have attribution.
I would not be
handy.
surprised, yeah.
My quotation is, and it's much briefer than that: "The time is near, which must determine whether Americans..." Whoops, I am reading you the wrong quotation.
I was going to say, that didn't sound
That
right.
didn't sound right.
No, that's what I was like. No, I am so sorry. You're vamp a little bit here, guys. I lost my quotation.
That's quite all right. It happens. We all, especially when we're doing stuff on our phones, it's very easy to lose.
Well, no, here it is. It is my first wish is to see this plague of mankind, war, banished from the earth.
Great sentiment.
Little idealism there. Yep.
Yes. Well, again, he's the practical idealist. It's not an oxymoron. It's not.
No, not at all.
All right, so the quote that I have chosen: "Associate yourself with men of good quality, if you esteem your own reputation.
Yep.
For it is better to be alone than to be in bad company."
I saw that when I was researching. Love that
Yes.
quote. I'm glad
Yes.
you went with that.
Better to be alone than be in bad
Yes,
company.
of course. The implication is that if you seek out men of good reputation and you're alone, you're the bad apple.
Well, yeah, I suppose that's very true. Yeah.
Yes,
Because
because
it's very clear though. You are what you eat, so to speak, or as in you are the
company that you keep.
You are the company that
there
you
is
keep.
a maxim amongst motivational speakers that you are your income is the average of the 5 people you associate with the most. I don't know how true that is, but there's some truth that you associate with people of your own socioeconomic level.
And conform yourself to them.
Yes.
To the successful ones,
Yes.
or unsuccessful, I suppose this case may be.
Depending on the
Yeah, I mean, it is a note on this how we influence one another.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. Yes.
Again, he was a good judge of merit and a good judge of character, and liked to bring people in.
More importantly, he
just-
aspired to good character.
Yes,
He did. He
Yes.
recognized it as a concept that he worked towards actively and deliberately. It was not something that was amorphous for him.
Right. That's another quote that I almost chose was essentially that. Aspire to have good character.
Yeah, he could look beyond your circumstances to see what you are about.
Right.
And again, this idea of bringing along somebody like Hamilton, who did view him as a father figure, but it was a relationship they both benefited from.
Yes.
You know, Hamilton had a mentor, and Washington had someone he could depend on.
Well, Washington got the son he never had.
Yeah,
You know?
very much.
Yeah.
Very much.
So yeah, I'm sure that father-son dynamic went both ways. Yeah.
Very much. Very much. But it was, yeah, I mean, it's a really neat view on how he viewed, relationships with other people.
Oh yeah!
That,
look at that. He went to relationship. Yeah, I love that because
yes.
I go to relationship all the time.
This idea that the good stuff that other people are can rub off on you.
Exactly.
You can internalize.
Do you have anything you wanted to add to that before I
launch
on my own tying up?
No, I like the idea that Hamilton and Washington were father and son spiritually and effectively in many respects, although not necessarily ideologically or economically. But I was just thinking, I was making sure my timeline that Hamilton remembered Washington's death. Washington never knew of Hamilton's because it was about 6 years later.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I just want to make sure I caught that right because I know that was Washington's death was in many respects
Burr
something
is
that was
sitting vice president when he shoots Hamilton, right?
That's right.
I
Absolutely,
believe so,
that's correct. Yeah.
He's Jefferson's vice president.
Right. Yeah. And shall his name live in infamy?
The first vice president to not succeed his president.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I would like to think that has something to do with the shooting of Hamilton.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Burr is considered to be just one of the history scumbags, to use one of your words.
He's even Jefferson really kind of viewed him as someone to keep at arm's length. He was an opportunist. He viewed himself as someone who should be in charge, but he didn't understand the idea of you have to earn your way to be in charge in a republic.
So in the early days, he who goes into the election president comes out vice president.
Yeah, it's
something like that.
Yeah,
Yes.
a play on the old he who goes into the conclave as a pope comes out as a cardinal.
Yes,
it's the same type of thing.
Yeah, and that's very fair. It's the dichotomy and the irony of our system is that the guy who wants to be president is the last one we should give it to.
That's right.
I mean, but yet here we are. We have to give it to one.
It should be he who is called and chosen, not who self-selects.
Not always, because not everybody who is called and chosen should be chosen.
Well, that's true. That therein lies one of the ugly little fallacies of our democratic system. Just because you're the most popular does not necessarily mean you're the best leader.
Yes. So yeah, and that's that has
been
we see it all the time.
Yeah, we see it all the time.
Yeah. So when I look at this quote, I mean, I love it because I love things that encourage people to be the best that they can be.
Absolutely.
And this is obviously what it's doing. You want to be around men of good character because exactly like you said, Martin, it will rub off.
Yeah.
If you are around people who are good all the time, you will want to be good too. That becomes your tribe.
Yes, it's using tribalism in its best sense.
Yes.
To mold and create you, not vice versa. Although there is some of that. There always is.
Yeah. There's. It's always you contribute to the tribe contributes to you.
It's always synchronous.
Yes. And so, to me, that goes hand in hand with both of these quotes because if you are seeking to be not just be a good character but surround yourself with men of good character. To be in their company. To me, that's what he's talking about when he says to be Americans, to get rid of the sectionalism. No north, east, south, west. To be united in purpose. And obviously the supposition is that it's for a positive good.
United in purpose is an amazing way to phrase it. Very well done, Robert.
Yes, but it's broader than just that. I was thinking, it's also fraternal.
Yes. Yes. Well, that's yes.
But it's what does it mean to be an American? Well, it's there's a purpose. If we can find a purpose to unite us, that purpose being to be that shining city on the hill, as Reagan would phrase it.
But that's amorphous, though. We were very good at reuniting for a purpose, as in we must go across the sea and kill the Huns, that sort of thing, or fight Nazi Germany, whatever. But it's great when you've got a purpose, but every day in and out, you don't always.
Right.
You should be united still, though.
But you should still be united. And how are you united? Well, you're united, I think, in that fraternal sense, because I think that is part of the Be Americans.
Well, yeah,
we're all
liberté, égalité, fraternité. The French may have coined it, but we live it.
We really
yes.
do. Yeah. Well, we try probably better than anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, there is that relationship aspect to that, because when you say Be Americans, to surround yourself with men of good character, even if you're the only one in the group that is not, it is telling us to be with one another, but to be with the right one another, to not necessarily get rid of or exclude or destroy those who are not of good character, those who refuse to kowtow to the whims of the group. That's not the point.
That's another animal entirely, yes.
Yes, that's entirely another animal. That's where your quote would come in, where war comes in.
War comes in, yeah.
And I think for him, seeing us as Americans, getting rid of that section, that's result of that is getting rid of war.
Mm-hmm.
And now he may not have, obviously I don't think any of the founders could have envisioned where America ends up.
No. Too many things happen.
Yes. It's just, where we are now is so different from where we were then, it beggars the imagination.
Yes, it's almost, when we speak from time to time of the issue of where we've got to come from today and why we should go back to the way it was intended at the times of the founders, it's almost as a non sequitur.
Right.
On the large questions, yes, I understand that. But to take that to the micro level is missing the point.
Right. We can't. It's impossible to do that. But so I think if you are surrounded with men of good character, you're less likely to want to go to war, because men of good character should be able to work out their differences.
They seek reconciliation.
Yes, they recognize that there is that brotherhood of man. Whether that's a phrase he used or not, doesn't matter.
Peace is the natural state to which we aspire.
I don't know if that's. I don't know that I agree with it. Well, it's the state to which we aspire. I don't know that it's a natural state.
Well,
it's a supernatural state if you want to go theological, because
that is true.
That is the grace-filled pre-original sin state that we.
That is correct. I believe if you believe mankind was created good, which we as Catholics certainly do,
yes.
Then yes, the natural state of peace to which we aspire is where it's the gravitation, it's the equilibrium in nature that we work towards.
Right. And those of us who are not raging narcissists generally realize that there are things greater than ourselves, that there is something good beyond our own desires.
Yeah, ultimately peace is what benefits the most people. I truly believe that, because the greatest number. The problem is, so many of those people that it benefits have no power or authority.
Well, yes, because certainly China is not dealing with any civil wars internally or anything like that.
Uh-huh.
So they have peace, but I don't know how much it benefits that nearly 2 billion people. So that's my only caveat to that, is that a lack of war is not necessarily peace.
Oh, well, it depends on how you define war.
True.
Because what you're talking about there, I'm speaking of
strife.
I'm not speaking of necessarily military conflict. War is conflict taken to the extent where it has become inhumane. I suppose that's a better way of phrasing this, because
one could argue all war is inhumane.
Well, that's correct. By definition, that's kind of the benchmark, because conflict itself is natural and necessary, but once it reaches the point where it devolves into what we're calling war, then it becomes immoral and inhumane. And inhumane is the I don't want to say benchmark, but it's the litmus test for when you passed from natural, normal, beneficial conflict into something that is not.
I would put it.
It's kind of like pornography, as the old traditional.
Can't define it, but I know it when I see
When
it.
you know when you see it, that's exactly the same thing here.
So to me, so maybe a better way to put this in a more understandable way, or maybe this will help sum it up, because it is my job to hammer these things home.
Roberto Somalias, yes.
You know, make sure I got the words right, because I lost a little bit there. Crap. So, I had it.
Oh
and I
no,
lost
we
it.
hate it when this happens. Yes.
So you were talking about. Let's just recap here just a little, so maybe that'll trigger the words that I had. So,
The fact that war itself, when you use that term of war, you are referring to something that is.
I got it.
There we go.
Okay,
I
I've got
knew
it.
we'd
Yes.
get back to
yes.
it. Yes.
Yeah, now if somebody else spoke, I could figure it out.
Okay.
Yes.
Go
There's
before
no
you-
pressure on me to fill the
Go with it
silence.
before you lose it, brother.
So, everything short of personal violence, because personal violence is obviously where war starts,
Okay.
and so I would include me, walking over there and smacking Martin upside the head.
Okay.
That would be very personal war. It'd be very personal to Martin. Anything short of that is the crucible in which ideas and people are tested and refined.
So violence is the thou shalt not cross line. It's the do line.
Yes.
Once you enter into violence, then no longer are ideas being tested, refined, and made.
Or people.
You've overflowed the crucible, and you can't then
put it back.
Yeah, you can't put it back in to keep burning away the impurities.
The dross.
Right. So violence is the definition of war.
Yes, because
But
we
then
can talk about personal violence. We can talk about physical violence. We can talk about verbal violence.
I was going to say we got to define this a little bit.
And by verbal violence, I don't mean just
character assassination is one way of looking at that.
Because anytime you get personal, anytime you devolve to the ad hominem.
Okay, which is to a person, so it's
Yes.
a personal. It involves attacking a person.
Right, insulting the other because you have no way to refute the idea.
Which is violent either physically or otherwise.
Yes.
So in other words, it devolves into the difference between war and natural conflict is attack.
Yes.
Once you attack,
well, once you attack the person. Because you can attack ideas.
Yeah,
that's right.
Once you've moved away from focusing on the idea into something else.
So the real word then is not attack, but it's personal.
Target. Once the target
Targeted.
becomes
Okay, that's good. That's
the
good.
person or the people.
Because you have
once the
it has to be
shifts.
irrespective of scope.
Yes.
Yes. To define this properly.
Once the target moves beyond the idea, the thing being debated, the action to be decided.
Once we personalized.
But once it becomes personalized, that to me would become the definition of war. And I would argue that
Cold or hot, it doesn't matter.
yes, cold or hot doesn't
because
matter.
the Cold War is actually not a bad example of that. Because the Russians were, the Soviets in particular, were the demons that must be opposed at every state of connection, which they said the same thing to us.
Right.
Even though we never, fortunately, devolved into a hot war.
It was still a war of a kind.
It was a war of a kind.
Certainly, a Cold War is far better than a hot war.
Absolutely. That's right.
And, you can make the argument that a Cold War, depending on how it's conducted, is still that crucible of ideas.
Yeah, I mean, you're
Well, yeah, and that itself can be beneficial.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, again, it is the razor or the iron by which you sharpen your argument for your idea.
Yes. And the reason I bring this refining of your idea, of your quote,
Right.
is because I want to go back to mine, because that's the whole point, of my segment. That's what men of good character do. Right?
We constantly refine. Iron sharpens iron. I mean, it's a very male-oriented quote, but it's very much be better than you are.
Right. Aspire
And use other people's ideas and wisdom and strengths to do that.
Right. What does that practically mean to surround yourself with good people, presumably so that you can become one yourself? Again, I could probably work my way around to bringing all of my summations back around to it, but respect the inherent dignity of the human person.
Right. I mean, that's what it is. It's people of good character. The ideas that lead to their actions are grounded in the notion of the inherent dignity of the human person.
So therefore,
Yes. Exactly.
To make sense, then war is the point where the dignity and the sanctity of human life is no longer respected.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we probably made that exact
I think that's kind of
Yes.
where we're circling around the drain here.
You've abandoned.
Once you abandon that
dignity.
principle, then war is the inevitable result.
Yes. And the sad fact of war is that even if you are the side that is attacked, unless you roll over and allow yourself to be conquered or perhaps destroyed,
That's right.
you have to resort to the same methods.
Yeah.
Even though...
Which is something that ideologists and those who fight on particular things have realized, and I think again it goes back to World War I. Thank you. You cannot make a deal with the devil. You must destroy your opponent to truly be safe.
Yes. Yes.
And see, the problem is in large numbers of people.
That's interesting the
not
way you
possible.
put that. That's interesting the way you put that.
That's
We
right.
have railed many times against the whole idea of things like safe spaces and microaggressions and these things that people get offended over. Seemingly to our generation, it's like, I don't even see what you're offended about, much less.
Well, yeah, it's like grow up and recognize that this is not a safe.
Put your big boy panties on.
Put your big boy's panties on. Realize this is not a world.
fine.
The world is not a safe space. You have the duty, the responsibility, and the joy of becoming part of the arena,
Right. And that,
which you can survive and thrive in.
yes.
It doesn't kill you. It makes
the
you
arena,
stronger.
yes. Short of actual war,
That's right.
very little is out there trying to kill you. People who go out there every day.
Yeah, in this
Now, obviously-
civilized world we live in.
Yes, obviously there are exceptions to that. Those that are caught up in gang wars and the drug trade and things like that. Yes, there are things out there that are trying to kill them. That is the exception, not the norm.
Yeah, I mean, a Denny's sign is an exception.
Exactly.
Poor lady. That is the freakest accident of freak accidents that I think I've ever heard of.
I'm sorry, you'll have to explain.
Yesterday, I believe it was, or maybe perhaps it was Thursday, in E-Town, Denny's sign fell off its post and landed on a car and killed a woman.
Oh my God.
Ouch.
Can you imagine your car parked in the Denny's parking lot and the Denny's sign falls on you? So, totally bizarre.
Totally bizarre.
So,
Well, that's not that different than being struck by lightning. It's the
It
same
might
thing
be even more. You might have a better odds of being struck by lightning
than that happening.
than
That's
that
right.
happening.
Well, I mean, it reminds us of it reminds us of the randomness of being alive, but it should remind us more of the preciousness of being alive.
Well, but I think what Martin is saying is it's just proving that no matter what you do, where you go, it's not inherently safe.
That's correct.
There's always an
yeah.
element of risk.
Yeah, that's exactly. Absolute safety is a joke, and it's not. It doesn't exist.
Well, and seeking it diminishes us, is where I was going with that.
Well, yeah.
Yes.
In other words, we are designed to work with both fight and flight.
Yes.
And if we surrender ourselves completely to flight, then we constantly find ourselves dying a little bit.
Well, I think anytime
Be a
you
little
try and
metaphorical
use
here.
the power of whatever the next level is, whether it be your school or the state or whatever, to drive whatever it is that is causing you discomfort from the arena of life, I think that's an evil act.
Ultimately, yeah. Why can't you do it
I think-
yourself?
Well, it's not even so much why can't you do it yourself, because that implies a bit of a laziness. But I consider it an evil act because it is full of hubris.
Narcissism, yeah,
and
definitely.
narcissism.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
you were saying that, what you think and believe is so sacred that nothing can encroach upon that.
Yeah.
Simply by the act of you saying it and thinking it.
Yes, because even thinking something,
that's right. Because you're anointing yourself as God, essentially.
Essentially,
and
yes.
you're taking
or at the very least, an archangel who's trying to do the will of God. Because a lot of people who are into this sort of thing see themselves that way, as doing the will of not necessarily God, but as being champions of what is right. And in doing so, they trample on others. And I don't care who you are, left, right, center, communist, socialist, capitalist, as soon as you start trampling on others, especially, and there's even a Washington quote that I saw there, that when you start trampling on free speech...
That's right, yeah, I'll consider that, seriously.
You're in serious danger.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's
a very American idea. It's a reactionary against the British understanding. You could be in prison for what you spoke.
Yes.
In England, and that's probably one of the roots.
In most countries, at some point in time, you could be in this country during World War I, the Sedition Act. You could be jailed for certain things you said and did. So it's not unheard of even here.
Yeah.
Now the Sedition Act was
highly unconstitutional. It's still
and
it still survived.
Well, it survived for the duration, but ultimately,
for the duration, yes, right.
The courts struck that down.
That's right. Sooner or later, we self-correct. We course-correct.
Yes. Now, for some people, it may be too late.
I don't exactly.
But
there's the tragedy.
Yeah. Yes. But as soon as you get into that, where you are trying to get rid of that crucible, that's war.
Ah, yes.
Getting rid of the crucible, where you have to compete with your mind, with producing something that is better,
within a certain boundary. Basically, once you work within a certain agreed upon arena, then it's good. Conflict is good and necessary. In fact, otherwise nothing happens. Once you step outside the agreed upon arena, however, then you devolve into war. So
it's like Robert was saying there. My safety is so important that your way of life can't even be in my view anymore.
Right.
And then from that, it's not a far step to go, not only can it not be in my view, or I don't want you around, you must be destroyed.
Yes. Off to the camps with you.
Yes.
Whether to be gassed and burned, or just indoctrinated.
Yes.
However you want to put it.
Yes.
Metaphorically, obviously, nobody is setting up camps yet. But it's how it starts. When you allow that kind of thinking that certain ideas are not even allowed.
Oh, yes.
No matter how heinous they are.
Well,
because once you set the principle and the precedent that an idea or a viewpoint can be destroyed, or the person that holding it can be destroyed, you have opened the door so that anyone can be destroyed.
Well, because it always advances. Because there's always, of course that view's wrong, so I don't care if that view's destroyed, but it always advances.
Yes,
there's always the next.
Because then there's a new bottom
that has because there's always the next outrage. The outrage du jour has to then be destroyed.
I love Joe Straczynski's take on this in Babylon 5. He spoke about, and the quote was, "We do not want cooperation; we want conversion." And that's ultimately where that's.
But see, that's the irony, because in the real world, cooperation leads to conversion.
Well, correct. Exactly. I mean, it's something, recognizing the fact that one is an authoritarian model that imposes, and the other is one that proposes and brings people together for a not under coercion, but a coalition of people.
It's growth. It's personal growth. It's
That's
an
right.
organic growth.
But the problem is, for those who have no patience,
yeah,
you have to find another way to ensure you get what you want. It's very. I don't want to say narcissistic, because that's not quite it. But
there's an element of that. Not in the same way that we think of monarchs going to war because their honor once was slighted, but it's still a bit of narcissism.
Essentially the same thing. It's my way or the highway.
Yes.
And I'm not willing to mess with to take the time to convince you. Yes. I will, using war in some form, coerce you.
Right. because the crucible's painful. You know,
It can be. It certainly can be.
I think for somebody it's painful, but I mean, the struggle is always going to be painful. Otherwise, it's not really a struggle. That's
But
kind
then
of the
again,
point.
ultimately, assuming our trajectories are correct, and that is not by no means safe, we can convert people to being better than they are.
Yes. Well, hopefully, people will convert themselves.
Because if we have a moral compass and a moral center that recognizes what is difference between good and evil, which has always been the issue,
Yes.
then we should, via the crucible, the vehicle of the crucible, make ourselves better. Some of it is evolutionary, because that which is, but that's more mechanistic and more of a efficiency system.
Yeah.
The efficient fall away, the less efficient fall away, the more efficient rise. And it's a bit of a Darwinism. I don't want to go down that road because are we over time? We're like way over time.
Well, we're at 90.
Oh,
wow.
crap! Well,
Wow.
Captain, bring us home.
Well, yeah, I think we have certainly gone through our quotes about as best as we can. I really didn't think we were at 90. I thought we were closer to an hour. That really flew by.
Man, because when we's on the game, boys,
We are, yes. Well, we had a few,
When we's hitting the nail on the head, come on,
so,
put the hammer in our hands.
Washington's got a lot of wisdom.
I know we only did 3.
Yeah.
Oh, and a couple others that we kind of tossed in.
Talked about, because they're related. But yeah, there's a lot of wisdom there, not just in what he did, but also in what he said. So, Francis, what's next?
Well, we're going to continue. This is not over, guys. We're going to continue with our understanding and exploration of not just Washington, because we've kind of pummeled him a lot, but we're going to slide into
In a loving way.
In a loving way, that's right. We're going to slide more into the revolution itself. We're going to talk, but again, it's complicated, as Trevor Slattery would say. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk next episode with the seeds of the revolution.
Yeah.
We're going to run a several month series over the revolution, and I'll give Martin here a lot of credit for kind of defining how that breaks out. Because man, there's thousands of ways you could slice the Snickers, slice the Snickers bar. We're going to talk about the seeds and the bringings that comes this together. Next episode is going to be the seeds of the revolution and what brought us up to this. So it's kind of another beginning. Take a deep breath, take a drink of your bourbon, folks, and join us next episode.
Hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes drop every second and fourth Friday at 6 a.m. Eastern.
Spread the word. We're on all the major podcast platforms, and leave us a review. That helps others find us.
We're on Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com.
I'm Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Join us next time.